So good morning. If I could have your attention up here, I'd be so appreciative. And I'll tell you what the plan is for today. So I might turn the lights off entirely so you can see the screen behind me better. My plan today is there's a couple lectures. One is on graphic design principles, which I skipped last week and would like to address today. And then, but I bet you guys really want to see that Italian video again, right? No. Susan's like, no, I am so over it. Okay, all right. I think how many times I've listened to that one. All right, so we're going to talk about graphic design principles. And then I'm going to introduce to you text wraps, which I've touched on lightly just by demoing things in class when people ask questions. And then any questions you have on chapter 6. There is a video on the home page right here for demoing from last semester, chapter 6. So you can choose to work independently. The video is pretty comprehensive, or I could demo it in class for you. I'll leave that to you. There's a few tools that show up in there that are lots of fun, which is alignment tools, which I showed you much earlier in the semester when we did the teacup exercise, which was fun to know, made it easier. And so we'll get to that. So let's just start with the design lecture, because it's pretty intuitive for most of you. If I could have your attention up here, and if you could put your computers to sleep, that would be most excellent, please. We really touch on design principles very simply in this class. I know it's a graphic design class and you expect to get slammed with graphic design principles, but hopefully it becomes more familiar to you as you do the assignments and you see the way they've designed different projects for you and so forth. But there's so many things that you do intuitively, you might not be conscious of it. So very simply, you've already learned in your paragraph panels how to align your body of text, right? And if you look behind me, you can see that you're familiar already with setting text as flush left and flush right and centered. And this is justified where it's a right alignment and a left alignment. And in InDesign, this is a justified paragraph, and it's justified left, which means the last line of that paragraph is flush left. Justified center would take that set of letters and put them right there, and justified right would take this block, type these 3 words, and put them there. And then there's something called force justified in your paragraph panel in InDesign, which would take this last line of type and space it out and force the type to align on the right, which is called force justified. And if you look at the page behind me, intuitively, I think we did talk about this with our grid lecture. Intuitively, if you look at the 3 alignments at the top of the page, Annalena, if you look at the 3 graphics at the top of the page, do you have one that you like the best?
The right one.
The right one. Why do you like the right one best?
Because I like when it's flush right.
You like when it's flush right. Well, the center one is flush right too. What makes this one better than the other one?
Is there any different on those?
Take a look hard. Maybe somebody will help you. Is there a difference between the center one and the flush and the one on the right?
Is one a cover sheet?
Jared, is one a cover sheet?
The one on the right?
No, not really.
The little jagged line.
Is it the little jagged lines on this one? That's different, yeah. This is a flush right layout, and the only difference between the 2 is the one on the far right has the jagged lines. And if you start to look at these, let me blow this up a little bit. If you look at those, what happens here is the one on the left is unpredictable. It's inconsistent layout. It doesn't use the graphic design principle of alignment with much success. because the type at the top is left aligned, but it starts kind of a little left of center. The artwork is flush left. This block of type is centered. That block of type is centered. It's inconsistent. And this one in the center is flush right, which uses consistent alignment, right alignment. But the one on the far right, Annalena chose that was her preference without really thinking about it. What happens is the graphic that's in this reptile, ginkgo, whatever it is, gecko, I mean, this ragged graphic, like grass, was duplicated and repeated on the left, and then it pointed into the flush right type, which drew your eye to the right, and you have a hierarchy of text from headline type to graphic to kind of subheads or body copy down below. And that designer who created that created a hierarchy and a sense of predictability. And so intuitively, as you start to design things, start to consider graphic design principles, and in this case, for example, alignment. There's another graphic design principle referred to as unity, where it's creating a sense of order and visual balance through how you combine different elements, the relationship of one form to another. So if you look at the graphic up here, where the star, the circle, and the square are virtually about the same size. The elements are somewhat similar, and they're scattered on a page. Nothing feels cohesive. But when you take those elements and you change the weight or the scale of them by blowing up the square and layering your objects and unifying them, you create a certain balance on the page. And this balance, it's an asymmetrical design because it's in the bottom right corner, but it's balanced by all this negative white space. So the page doesn't feel out of balance because of the unification of all those graphics. And I like to look at this poster because there's so many things to analyze about it. So Eric in the back, what do you see on this poster? What's the first graphic you visually see? The E, and then what's the next graphic you visually see?
The bed going on the side.
Okay, so you see the E first, and then you see this, is that what you're telling me? Or you see this?
Both.
Okay, so you see the R overlapping the E, or sitting behind the E, and then you notice the headline that's rotated on its side. Can you read that headline?
Yeah, Bible of the fittest.
Yeah, excellent. I find that hard to read, but you're right. It says Revival of the Fittest. And what do you think of the color palette, Eric? The colors, you like them?
Yeah, they make it
Yeah, you like the combination of colors. Okay. And if you were walking past this poster, do you have any clue what it's for?
good.
No idea. Right. I don't either. Actually, I've looked at it so many times I've now got a little bit of a clue. So the poster, as a graphic artist, you often think about, again, the graphic design principles that you use. One, this uses color, and it uses it in an attractive way, according to Eric, and I happen to agree, we probably all do. It uses scale, where it took the graphics of just type, like the lowercase r and the lowercase e, it added color to them, it added transparency to them, it overlapped them. So instead of them becoming just an R and an E, they become a graphic on the page because of their scale. Because the R, the lowercase r, you know it has a serif bleeding off the edge of the page. You can see the shape of the R, which follows the curve of the E, because they sit on top of each other. And then you can take a secondary step back and see what it says. It says Revival of the Fittest, and Eric and I didn't really know what it says, but there's an orange subhead under Revival of the Fittest, which says Digital Versions of Classic Typefaces. Now, there's many things I think are successful about this poster. I think the color is successful. I think the scale of the type is successful. I think it's a good example that you don't need to have, let's say, artwork, but type in this case serves as artwork for this graphic. I also think kind of like the grass pointed at the gecko. These green squares point into the type here. And I also think that this headline up here and this body copied down here creates a vertical tension, which makes this an attractive layout, which all of those things are successful, but I think it's a miserable failure because you don't know what the heck the poster's for. And posters are designed to walk past them at a quick glance like a billboard, and you immediately know what it says. And then if you're interested, then you stop and you read it. But my guess is you might just keep walking past this one. First off, headline type is hard to read when it's on its side. You have to kind of turn your head. And so if it's important text, you probably want to make it easier to read than turning it, rotating it 90 degrees. So what I like about this is the balance of the page. There's lots of interesting visual things going on. There's all this kind of negative open space of this graphic from the type. There's the fun tension of the text in this column at the bottom to the headline at the top. It's sending your eye, these green squares are sending your eye back into the page. But if you really look at it in terms of, did I communicate the message successfully? Maybe not. It might be a little too clever for itself. Maybe there's a different way to have considered laying it out where it would be an easier kind of glance and understand. And then you can start to add elements that draw people in that might have more details. And then you look at this design of this poster down here, and Crystal, what do you think of that? Tell me the alignment of that poster.
Centered.
Everything's centered, right. And how did they handle the type in the poster? What are the letters?
Capital.
Capital. They're all uppercase, right. And if you chose to read German, could you read that easily as all uppercase letters?
Yeah.
Tony says yeah. Can you?
They're a little close.
They're a little close together. They're really tightly kerned, so it's not that readable. Okay. One of the things that they did aesthetically here, what did they do to their type here? Is it a breathable poster? No, you're shaking your head no. Why?
There's like not a lot of space between the edge. And
Okay. So it has really tight margins that make it a little too tight to breathe. Do you like the alignment of it? The balance?
Yeah.
Yeah, balance is fine, centered. And again, they used type, they used a font as their graphic to take you from the top of the page with this huge S to take you to the bottom of the page, right? Kind of elegant and beautiful. They also did something else. Let's say this was typeset digitally. What did they do to the background here that's kind of unusual? Who said that? Tony? What'd you say? Say it louder.
The texture of it?
Yeah, the texture. They added a texture to the background. So what effect does that give it?
Like a rustic kind of view.
Kind of a rustic look, kind of vintage, kind of a retro look, right. So when we do things visually, we consider our balance, but we also consider creating a greater interest on the page. And the artists who designed this set it up with that texture background. Now, I'm in agreement with Crystal, actually. I think the type's a little too close together, and you'll come to know that all uppercase letters are hard to read. All uppercase letters, we end up kind of interesting. If we set a line of type, and I type the word if I type this word and you look at only half the letters because it's upper and lowercase letters, our eye is trained to look at the shape of a word when we read. We're not really reading every letter in a word and sounding it out again and all that. We're sight reading almost everything now. And we look at words that are familiar shapes. We're looking at word patterns to understand a word. So when we look at type, that's all uppercase, like this poster. We don't have the visual clues of the upper and lowercase letters to follow the shape of a word. So it becomes harder to read. That's why you would never set up body copy, a large block of text in all uppercase letters, because you'd really have to slog through that text. You really have to work hard at reading it. You know, where a headline, okay, one word, you glance at it, you grab it. 3 words, you glance at it, you grab it. But a large block of text, whether it's German or not German, is really hard to read. So as a designer, there's many beautiful things in this layout: the center type, the elegant use of the font, the texture that creates a dimensionality and a warmth, kind of a retro personality to it, even that goes hand in hand with a font. And but the difference is, yet again, what are you trying to accomplish with your poster or your message or your ad or your whatever it is, and how do you make it easier for somebody? So these are intuitive things that as you start to design through them, you'll become more familiar with. And let's see, who walked in the very back there? Is that Eddie, or is that, what's that? Is that, what?
What you say? What you say?
Nawat, is that Nawat? Okay, I can't see up here, and I don't have my glasses on too, which makes it doubly hard. Dark and no glasses. Okay, so Nawat, you see this ad? What's the first thing you notice? First thing. What's the first thing you see in it? Clock. Okay, don't think too hard. Right, clock. What's the next thing you notice?
Title.
What's
Make time.
make time? Next thing you notice is make time, says Jared.
Sorry.
That's okay. And what's the next thing you notice after make time?
What is font?
Is that what you're saying? Fordham. Right. The logo for the college. Okay, so the first thing you noticed was a clock. Then Jared says the next thing you notice is the headline next to the clock that says make time. And the next thing you see is Fordham. Okay. So there's a designer who had to buy ad space, who created an ad for Fordham College, and they want you to make time for your future, right? Headline, subhead, logo. That's a hierarchy. And then they hit home with a make time for your future using the clock as the graphic. Now, if you're interested, you'll probably stop and you'll read the small type. If you're not interested, you'll flip the page, right? So if you're a designer, another thing that makes your ads or your designs more readable or more approachable is white space. So I ask you, if I took, I know it's not going to make a difference when I do this, but if I covered up the clock and I moved it over and I only had half the clock right down here, would you still know that's an alarm clock, everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So if you had the alarm clock from here over, you'd still know as an alarm clock. So imagine if the designer had taken this clock, made it bleed off the edge of the page. Think how much white space they could have had. How much more breathability the ad could have had. So it's nicely designed in the sense that it has a hierarchy of its message. You could easily read the headline. You knew who the college was because the logo was the appropriate scale for the page. And you understood the headline because of the clock as a message. But think of all the white space that we could have created more breathability, which translates to readability in an ad. The other thing is, did anybody read this part down here? Not really, right? I think, personally, that when you create a line and a separate block of text, you separate it from the rest of the ad and it becomes something you kind of discard.
I didn't even see it.
You didn't even see it,
No.
right. And it is part of the ad, and you can argue in the upper left corner it says education for adults, and that's in gray in the upper left corner, and it's gray down here on the bottom. But I think when you start to put things in containers, like this stroke around this gray box and that stroke around that gray box, you immediately discard it because you think it's something different or separate. And these are little subconscious things. Aesthetically, it's a cleanly designed ad. But those elements, by handling them that way, I think get lost. I think they become um, insignificant to this ad where you visually eliminate them. So as you design things, think about what hierarchy you want to emphasize your message, how you can create a readable message, and what elements you can use visually to enhance the meaning of your message. One of the things you're going to learn in a couple weeks, just a couple weeks, is you're going to learn to work with something called spot colors. And spot colors is when you create a design that is one color, and you take that one color, any color of ink, in this case blue, like the shoe, you use a spot color, which is often referred to as a Pantone matching system color, which is PMS, Pantone matching system color. And you use tints of that one color ink to create a more interesting layout, to create a more interesting graphic. And it's super economical because it's still one color. You can swap out black ink for blue ink, same cost, really. Doesn't matter. But you can create a more interesting design by creating tints of the color. The other thing you can do when you use different elements of graphic design, you can use something like a gradient blend, where you can still use one color and you can take those tints of a color and create a gradient blend. And there's a fabulous gradient blend tool in InDesign, which I think every student starts to use because it's so much fun to use, but it kind of gets abused because you can create a gradient. Here, let's just create a box, and let me pull up the gradient tool. And you can, with your gradient, add colors. Let me change this a second here. Let me do my gradient. Let me double click on this gradient. There it is. Gradient tool. And I can just drag an ink swatch to my gradient and make a whole little universe of rainbows. I'm just dragging my ink swatches to it, and I can yank them off to eliminate them, and I can move where they're positioned, and I can move them on my slider or gradient. There, I'm trying to get this white one. There we go. And move it and slide it and change the distance between them and play with it. And I can change my linear gradient to a radial gradient, or I can change it to an angular gradient where I can change the angle, let's say, to 45 degrees. Fun, right? Gradient tools are super fun. So everybody starts to make beautiful sunsets on all of their graphics because they're so easy and fun. And my attitude is a gradient needs to have a purpose. You don't just use a gradient because it's fun. What you might ask yourself is, you might say, is your bank account diminishing? And then you might choose to select a gradient. Let's close that one out. See, oh, it kept our gradient. Hide options, show options. Let me just put one back in here. I'm just yanking them off, my color swatches. Come on. Let's go. There we go. Let me change my text box. Oh, that works. And let me switch. There we go. This is my point. See, doesn't that enhance the meaning of the word diminishing when you add a gradient to it like that? So consider you have these beautiful tools all through Adobe software, InDesign, Photoshop, Illustrator, and something like the gradient tool. And consider how you can use these tools to elevate and enhance the meaning of what your message is. So what this is demonstrating to you is the use of a gradient blend. And gradient blends, for example, like the one we have in the word diminishing in InDesign, this is just black ink. This is black ink, and what makes it diminish down to gray and then almost white and then to nothing is all ink is printed through either a solid or dots. Because when you print something on offset printing, when you print something, everything is made up of a bunch of dots. And how close together those dots are and how large the dots are is what creates the illusion of this lightening tint. It's still black ink on the paper, but it's really the size of the dots and how close they are to the other dot next to one another that creates this illusion. And if we come back to this picture, that's what's showing you here. Here, for example, this is darker because it's got more black, and notice the white overtakes the black as it moves along to create the gradient. The other thing is sometimes we design things and we use what's called reverse type. Reverse type is where you have white type on a dark background. So you could have a field of black and turn your type to white, and that would be called a reverse. Now, if you look, for example, at this ad here, how many typefaces are they using? Renato, can you see how many they're using?
3.
3. So here, well is 1, like heels, correct? And then time is a separate one. And wounds is a separate one, so that makes 3. And this is the same as heels, the same font, but it's just a lighter weight, right? So this little tiny ad with, 5 words in it uses 3 fonts. That's kind of overkill. And generally, design-wise, for most publications, for anything, you really don't want to use more than 2 font families, just for continuity and predictability. There's many, many fonts in a family, and you might not even need 2 font families. Like I have font families that have like 20 different variations in that one font family. So you'd be able to find what it is you need. So this ad shows you lots of things. It shows you how to use a 2-color design. I know that well looks black, but it's blue, and this is actually a red. Do you think there's any benefit by making this area a different color than here? Annie, do you think that there's a benefit from making this a different color than that type, red or blue?
Yeah.
What do you think it does?
It
It stands out. And if this was a solid blue and that was blue, or if you see it as black here, if this is black and this is black with reverse type, would it still have the same impact, do you think? I mean, it's still just a reverse type. Do you think we have to spend an extra $200 just to make that background red? Probably not, right? Probably not worth the money. So your job as a designer might be to understand how to use solid colors and reverse type, but how to watch your client's budget by not using color unnecessarily. That color is not so exciting that it makes it worthwhile, right? So consider that as you design things. Consider if it makes sense when you break things up. And here, how many fonts are we using on this one? We have 1 font, a lighter weight of that font, smaller, and a different font. And then again, this is in black type and this is green. Is it worthwhile to use the 2 different colors in that layout? Althea, what do you think? Not really, right? You have different fonts and different weights, okay, maybe that's all right. But probably not worth paying $200 for the green font, right? Okay. The other thing is when you have designs is consider when you use colors how you can maximize it. So for example, you can use something called overprinting or transparency to create an enhanced design. By just creating an overprint or making these shapes transparent, you've created additional colors here, which I think creates a more dynamic, interesting layout, right? So these are just different tools you have, different elements of design, different elements that you can work with to enhance your designs and think about. The other thing, any questions about that before I jump to something else? Right? Notice it's pretty intuitive, right? Not brain surgery. The other thing I'd like to do is just introduce to you the Text Wraps lecture here. And rather than read this for you, there's a video down at the bottom on how to use text wrap in InDesign, and there are steps on how to use text wraps, but I'm going to demo a couple things. What I'd like to do is pull up Chapter 7 exercises. And notice, you need to read this a little more carefully for Chapter 7. I know I'm skipping to 6, but you use text wraps in these assignments. And there are some assignments that are part of the chapter and not part of the student handout that you need to submit for your final project for this chapter. So there is this is a video that I did on this cheeseburger exercise, which is essentially about two things. It's about working with layers, and it's about working with text wrap. And I'm going to demo that briefly, and then I'm going to leave it to you to see if you want me to demonstrate. Let me pull this up. This one. Chapter 6 has two assignments. This is pretty clear for most of you who've now mastered tabs. And this one's new because you're going to learn how to cut lines using the scissors tool, how to align different shapes, and how to create the illusion of something weaving in and out. And I'm going to leave it to you if you want me to demo it for you, or if you want to watch the video that's already up for you. And then there's another assignment which looks super easy, but for some reason everybody ends up struggling with this because there's many elements, because now you're on Chapter 6, so you're at least halfway through the book and you should have a lot of skills under your belt. And this is using negative first line indent. This is using text inset down here where it says Money and Savings Bank at the bottom in the black box. It's using text inset. What it also is asking you to do is set up this document with a bleed and use all printers, marks, and bleeds, which isn't shown here, but it is required for the assignment. I think that's one of the points that you get for it. So, and then it's also placing a graphic, this photo of the house, and positioning it and enlarging it properly for the box. So I can demo all of those, or you can listen on your own to the videos that I've got for you. But let me come back right here to Chapter 7 and working, well, Chapter 7 and showing you text wraps. So when you have an InDesign document, text wraps is lots of fun, and I think I did show you this before. So I have an InDesign document here, and I'm going to make a text box that's going margin to margin. And I'm going to fill my text box with placeholder text. And I'm going to use my selection tool, and I'm going to go to Object Text Frame Options, and I'm going to make my box 3 columns. And I'm going to increase the gutter size because the gutter default is never big enough. I tend to go a little larger than 1/4 of an inch. And just to remind you, I'm going to inset my text in this box. I'm going to click on my chain link and inset my text because I'm going to color this box with a tint of color. So I'm going to go to swatches, and I'm going to go to blue, and I'm going to tint it 10%, right? So you can see I have just one text box, and I've done all kinds of great things to it, right? I've made my text 3 columns. I've put a tint background in there. I've inset my text so it doesn't touch the border of the text frame. And then, for example, let's say I wish to put a photo in here. I might go to File, Place, locate a photo. Let's take this family history photo. Select Open. My cursor is going to load with the graphic. And let's say I want to put the photo in the center of the page, like it's a newsletter about family history, right? So what this does now is my photo is overprinting my type. It's sitting on top of it. It's actually not overprinting it. That's inaccurate. It's blocking my type. And so the way to avoid that is you go to Window, you go to Text Wrap, and you get this toolbox, this panel right here. And it's very intuitive. Right now there's no text wrap applied to my photo, which is active. Here's where the text will wrap around the bounding box of my image. So let me click on that, and you see what happens. The text wraps around it. It all shifted. And notice it's still touching the frame of my box, so it's not very readable. And I'll show you how to correct that in a minute. This is going to wrap around my object shape. So if my box, for example, were a circle, let me do this differently. Let me get rid of my photo. Let me hold my shift key down here. Let me first pick the ellipse tool. Let me hold my shift key and my option key, and I'm creating a circle. And now I go to File, Place, and I'm going to place that same photo in my circle right there, right? Now you can see it better. So now you can see it's going to go around the bounding box of the circle, which is a rectangle. You know that from the XY coordinate assignment. If I select this, it's going to go around the object shape, which is the circle. And if I select this, it's going to skip past my shape. And if I select this, it's not going to go below my shape. Those are different text wrap options. If I come back to the bounding box one, it's going, let me pick this one. There, let me do that. Around the bounding box. In order to make the type not touch this top frame, I can do what's called offset. I can offset it on the top, on the bottom, on the left, on the right. And with the chain link, it will offset proportionally all around. If I change it to offset around the shape, it follows the line of the circle and it offsets around the line of the circle. You can see that. So that's text wrap. And the advantage of text wrap is it creates a more interesting layout. It enhances your design. One of the things to be wary of with text wrap is if I take this text wrap and I increase the offset too much, you start to break up your lines of type with short words, and that's super hard to read. Or you get something like this here where you've split one word around your text wrap. So learning text wrap is important. If I show you this in normal view, you can see what happens when you've created a text wrap. Right here, let me show you. Let me try and blow this up so you can see it. The text wrap for this artwork is really this blue outline. Can you see that? Probably blue on blue wasn't the best choice for you guys, was it? Can you see it in the back? You probably can't, can you? No, what? Can you see it? Oh, you can? Okay. So what this does is it creates a vector shape here. So I could grab that one anchor point of that outset and I can change it to anything. And you see how I change my offset outside my box. And when you have weird designs, sometimes in order to prevent, I'm hitting Command Z to undo what I did. When you have unusual designs and you don't want this to break here, you might just choose to pull that down so you don't run into that trouble. Yes, Susan.
Can you go back and then fix the text? If you say you want that much space, but you just want to then move the way those two words are broken and put them back together somehow, can you do that? Can you just go back to the text?
No, you cannot, because you've told it now to wrap around that circle shape. So the only thing you could do is change where this interferes and pull it down there. And now I fixed it by changing the outset of my box. So I can't do it with a type. I can do it with the outset, the vector graphic that's created to wrap around this box. Okay? Now, you have an assignment which is essentially, I think, let's pretend this is our cheeseburger. You have an assignment where you've created this cheeseburger. You've stacked it using layers. Would you like me to demo layers to you guys?
No.
Charlotte says no, Gen says no. What about you guys in the way back? Yeah, no? Alec, did you come in? What's that? Laura would like for me to. Thank you, Laura. Okay, so layers is interesting. When you, there's an assignment, and I'm not sure if I downloaded everything, so let's look in the work folder and see what we've got here. Let's look there. And I don't think that I have all my graphics. Okay, I don't. And I don't want to make you wait for me to download Cheeseburger, but layers in InDesign is not hard. Layers in InDesign might be something very simple. There's a layers panel, like everything in InDesign or any Adobe software. You can go to Window, and I can pull up the layers panel. And the advantage of layers is it separates things from one another, and you can move layers around. So for example, this is the Laura layer. And Laura likes oranges. There we go. Okay, so that's Laura's oranges. And again, who didn't want me to do layers, likes blue ovals. And I'm sorry, I'm going to cut that out, and I'm going to create a new layer. I can create a new layer by going to the bottom of the layer panel to create a new layer, or I can use the pull out right here at the top and create a new layer, and I'm going to call it again for blue ovals. I'm going to even type what they are so I can keep track of them. So blue oval, and on this layer, because it's active, I'm going to paste that blue oval. And on Laura, she was the orange. Okay. And then I'm going to make a new layer for Alberto. Alberto, what color do you want?
Yellow.
Yellow. Okay. And for Alberto, we're going to make a square. We're going to fill the square with yellow. And we have a Susan star. How many points do you want to your star, Susan?
8.
Okay, 8. And we're going to make your inset to your star 50%. And we're going to make it 4 inches by 4 inches. Big star, right? And what color is your star? Oh, I'm doing it on Alberto's layer. I'm going to cut it. What color do you want your star? Green?
Green's fine.
Green's fine, she says. Okay, let me cut the star, Command X. And I'm going to make a Susan layer. I'm going to name it, double click, name it, Susan Green Star. Okay, and on the Susan Green Star. So Laura, watch this. So I've got 4 layers here, and the whole concept behind layers is that you can move things on layers on top of each other. So Laura, you got stuck way in the back. I'm going to move you to the front by taking your layer and moving it up to the front. And then we're going to put Susan's green star on top of you so we could see it. And I'm going to move Gen's oval between the two of you. And I'm going to leave Alberto's rectangle back. That's all it is. Layers is just moving things around. You click and drag to move your sequence of them around. And that's layers. You can turn on and off layers by the eye. And you can turn them back on so you can view them. And you can also, let me put the star in front at the top. You can also lock it. So if I go right now to Susan's star and I try to move it, whoops, the star, the green star that I click on, I've locked the layer so I can't access it. You got to have the layer active, and I can't access it. So it keeps giving me back to something behind it. Is that clear, Laura?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Jared.
This kind of reminds me of how the arrange function works as well.
The arrange function works like this, but with the arrange function meaning object arrange send to back. For example, let me take the star and I go object arrange and I send it to back. I can't. It's the only thing on the layer. So when something's on a separate layer, you can't put it behind one another.
So you can have multiple objects on a layer and then try to arrange them on that specific layer. But
So I could hold my shift key down, I could select all my layers, I could merge my layers, and now they're all back on one layer. And now I can take my green star object arrange, send all the way to the back.
Right, but having the layers there is kind of easier then, because you can just see everything right there. in
You
front
can
of
see everything more easily sometimes, yes. Any questions about layers? Okay. All right, we did text wrap, we did layers. Let me show you one of my other favorites. Here's this. Let me take all these shapes at once. Let me hit my command, my option, my shift key, and I'm going to reduce all of these to really small. I'm going to take the rectangle and put it here, the oval here, the orange here, and the star here. Star here. Now, the other thing, and I'm kind of doing a quickie on this assignment, this one, the CD cover, so you can have time to work in the lab without me necessarily demoing it. One of the things you do is you create shapes and you duplicate them, and your shapes can sit wherever the heck you want them, but you're going to end up using the align panel, and you can align to different things. You can align to margins. I'll show you it. So right here I've got 4 different shapes, and I'm going to open the align panel, and once again, if you don't know how to find it, you go here to Object Layout, Align, and here's the Align panel. I'm going to tear it off. Now, the other thing about the Align panel is make sure that you always show options, this little pullout, because it gives you more choices. So for example, if I want to base align all of these objects, I can marquee them, click and drag and marquee. And very simply, look at the picture, I can align the bottom edges of all these 4 shapes. So they all align to the bottom of their bounding box, each of them. Then, excuse me, I can distribute the spacing of them, or I can center them all. Now they're all centered on top of each other. I can also center them vertically. Watch how they shift. See how they're all centered to one another? The other thing is I can take, again, this rectangle, and I can do what's called distribute spacing, where let's say this one's way over here. I can select all of these, and I can equally distribute the spacing between them, like that, which is super nifty. The other thing I can do is I can align to the selection or align to the margins. So let me align to the margin, and let me top align everything to the margin, and watch what happens. It top aligns to my top margin. Bless you. I can top align to the page and hit, I'll bottom align it. I'll top align it. No, I'll right align it. Here we go. There we go. So I'll right align to the page. And again, I can take this one here, and that one there, and I can select them all, and I can vertically equal the spacing, distribute it equally by doing that. And it did that by aligning to the page, because that's what I had selected here. Distribute spacing, align to page.
I'm going to ask a stupid question.
No question, stupid.
Okay, you're making your bounding box with the selection tool or with the rectangle?
I didn't make a bounding box. Each one has its own bounding box.
Okay.
And when I marquee them, I click and I drag, which lets me select them all.
With what tool?
The black arrow.
Oh, the black. Okay.
The black arrow, the selection tool. And I'm not making a bounding box. I'm just grabbing them all by clicking and dragging to select them all at the same time. And that's not, even though it looks like a bounding box, it's not really. However, right now I can center them. And remember, my alignment is to center to the page. So if I want to center them vertically to the page, there it goes. They're all centered to the page. I can do this, and I can marquee, select them all, change it to selection, align to selection, and I can center them to one another. But it's not centered in the page. You can see that. So that's the alignment tool, and it's pretty nifty. The other thing I'm going to do, let me base align these. And let me distribute the spacing to the margins, which is really what your assignment tells you to do. So I've got them all selected, all my shapes. I'm going to distribute spacing to the margins. And then for the CD assignment, really what you do is you take a line, you hold your shift key down, you draw a straight line between these objects. And actually, let me undo that for a second. Let me select all these right now, and let me use my alignment tool, Window Object Align. Let me align them to the selection, and let me center them vertically to one another like this, and you'll see why I did that. Let me pull them up high so you can see them. What you do for the CD cover for this one right here, so you have all these shapes, you space them appropriately, you make sure they're the right size and the right colors, the right sequence of colors, and then you draw a line through them, a straight line, and you add a squiggle to the line. Use the wavy line, and it's a round cap 9-point line. And what you do is, it's kind of odd, but you're creating the illusion of something weaving through it. So I'm going to use my line tool. I'm going to hold my shift key down. I'm going to draw a line through each of these. I'm going to give it the weight of 9 points because that's what the assignment told me. I'm going to make it black so you can see it. And it also said in the stroke panel to give it a round edge, a round cap. The cap is right here on the stroke panel. So what that does is it creates the illusion of a rounded line, right? And then what you do for this assignment is you use the scissor tool and you cut the line. Oh, and the other thing you do, and this is odd, so let me demo this for you because it's really peculiar, is you, and let me show you this in normal mode. You take the line and you also apply wavy to it. So that's my wavy line, that's 9 point. Then the other thing you do is you cut the line at the center of each object. But you're all going to try and cut on the black line. Don't. Because really the line is what goes through the center of the wavy line. So don't let that wavy line distract you. So I'm going to use my scissor tool from the tool panel, cut on the center of the line, cut there, and don't worry that the line starts to get wide and narrow. Just ignore it. Cut there, see how it changes, and this one's already at the center. And then really what you're doing, the only thing you're doing for this assignment is you're creating the illusion of something weaving. So like Jared said about object arrange, bring to front, I'm going to click on the circle, go to object arrange, and bring it to front, and it looks like this line right here. Let me cut that part off. It looks like this line came out of the center here, went underneath this one. Then I take this line and I go to object arrange, bring it to the front, and then I'm going to take my oval and I'm going to go to object arrange, bring it to the front, because now it looks like it went through the back of that, out through the front of this one, into the back of that one, and now if I take this line and go to object arrange, bring it to front, it looks like it's weaving. Does everybody follow that? That's really the CD cover assignment. So you get this illusion of it weaving like here. And I actually like my way better because they put theirs in front, in back, and front and back. I don't think it looks like it weaves as well. So either way is acceptable as long as it looks like it's weaving and each one weaves into the next. One other thing I want to call attention to about this assignment is it tells you to create a bleed when you create your document. Whenever you make a bleed, when you output your file, for example here, if I go to this file and I make sure I set it up with a document bleed, let me make this 6 by 6. And my document bleed is generally 1/8 of an inch, 1.25. There. And then if I create a graphic, for example, that bleeds, like here. Let me just fill that with color. Let me go to my swatches and fill it with this orange, not stroke it, fill it orange. And go to object arrange, send to back. There you go. I've got my graphic, right? You can't see my orange, make it white. Now, when you export these files, we haven't gone over this very much, but whenever you've created a document that has a bleed, which this does, and your CD cover will have a bleed, You make sure that when you save it, you're going to, of course, save your document. And I'm going to save this on the desktop as untitled, which you will never do. And I'm going to package it. I don't have any graphics, but I'm going to always package it. And I'll do that on the desktop also. Everybody's familiar with what I'm doing, right? And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to export it as a PDF file. This is what you need to learn about marks and bleeds. You go to Adobe PDF Preset, High Quality Print, and you're going to take your document name, of course, and make sure it reads appropriately for the chapter. Go to your package folder. Make sure you place your PDF in your package folder. Save your document, but always go to Marks and Bleeds. Select, this is the easiest way to do it so you don't ever mess up. Select all printers, marks, and bleeds. Always select Use Document Bleed Settings, and you export, and you're going to get the crop mark, the bleed mark. These are color bars used for printing and measuring ink density. These are registration marks for aligning each printing plate on top of one another. And then at the bottom, let's see if I can make this smaller for you. At the bottom of every page is what's called document information, where it tells you the name of the file and what page of that file it is and the time you finished completing it, and output it. And that document information is important because you're going to have different printing plates, for example, and different page numbers, and that information already just automatically puts it in there. So when you print something with all marks and bleeds, because if you created a bleed for it, make sure you select all of that. Does anybody want me to demo that again? No? Okay. So for Chapter 6, this is, pretty much the only thing unfamiliar to you would be creating this document with a bleed. You're going to place the graphics, you're going to select the correct fonts, you're going to build the shapes, you're going to make sure and have the alignment of them accurate based on what you see here. You're going to use the alignment panel. And this one down here, again, I want to call attention to, there's two ways that they do it. They show you one alignment. One alignment is what you did on that production sequence where you made an outdent, negative, first line indent was negative. Pay attention to how you center your graphic. Make sure you build your document with a bleed and print it with all printers, marks, and bleeds. But make sure all your text aligns here and that your spacing in this document is what you see here. And then make sure that money and savings in this black area, which is reverse type, you learned that term today, reverse type, make sure it's not touching the black edge. They show you one more tool here, which is a little strange. So I'm going to highlight this text and show it to you. I'm going to copy it from the PDF. I'm going to go to my InDesign document. I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to create a text box, and I'm going to paste Command V the text. There's two ways to align these bullets. One way to align the bullets, I'm not sure what type they tell you, but let's say it's 11-point type on 14-point leading, and make sure they probably tell you to have space after each of the paragraphs. But what you want to do, what's key here, is that these initial letters align flush left. So like the O in owners would sit under the O in offerings. And there's two ways to do that. One way to do that is to select this, go to your paragraph panel, and indent, and do negative first line there. And then you hit a tab in front of this. Tab, 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 right? The other thing to do, I'm going to hit undo, is that you can there. The other thing you can do is this. You can put your cursor right to the left of the big O. you go to type, you go to insert special character, I think it's other, indent to here. It's pretty nifty. So what happens is, before I select it, my cursor's in front of the O in offerings. Actually, let me move this to the right a little so you can see it better. Maybe it won't show up. The O in offerings, and I want this O for owners to line up with the O. So I go to type, insert special character, other, indent to here, and watch what happens to the O when I do that. It indents to a line there. And that's, I think, what they tell you to do for this assignment. Okay? Any other questions? All right. All right, then why don't you use this time for lab time? You've got a quiz due that closes today for chapters 4 and 5, and lots of assignments to catch up on.